Thank you for coming to the Fibre Resilience panel. So my name is Frank Chevalier. I'm co-head of technology consulting at Analysys Mason. Analysys Mason is a global consultancy company which specializes in TMT, and we are also sponsoring this event. Please join me in welcoming our 5 eminent panelists here, which offer a unique combination in network resilience, including operations, network architecture, wholesale versus retail, and B2B versus B2C. So we first have Alessandro Gropelli, which is director at Europe Connect. We also have Paul Nasterpad, which is CEO at Eurofiber Netherlands. We've got Trevor Linney, who is a network technology director at Openreach. We've got Virginie Gérardin, which is fiber network department lead at Proximus. And last but not least, we've got Yuri Kormaz, who is CEO at Ukraine Telecom. So for this panel, we will start by having an opening statement from each of the panelists here. So I will leave the place to Alessandro to start.
Good. Thanks a lot for the introduction. I'm Alessandro Gropelli, Director General of Connect Europe. For those who follow the life of trade associations in Europe, you might remember us with our old name, which was ETNO, the association grouping the biggest telecom operators across European markets, so not only EU, but also Switzerland, Albania, Iceland, UK. Today, I was asked a bit to say, how do we define the topic of resilience from the viewpoint of a group that gathers the biggest operators in Europe? It's, of course, a very interesting topic and also one on which it's difficult to give a unique definition. So I will give you our view, how telecom operators or the major telecom operators seem to be looking at resilience right now. So the first thing with which I would start is really the political and geopolitical understanding. Maybe up until 4 or 5 years ago, I would have maybe mentioned politics, policy, regulation, but I would have not mentioned geopolitics. Now, for everything that we do in our sector, we need to start from the geopolitical scenario. This means that all the changes that we're seeing across the globe, how the different regions are interacting, are reshaping a bit what we thought of as global supply chains in our industry. They're still global supply chains, but the world of countries and nations seems to disagree a bit with us that we should stay global or globalized, and is introducing quite a lot of tensions in our world. But there is a silver lining, there is a good thing in all the at times terrible geopolitical tensions that we are seeing, and we will have the colleague from Ukraine later. But there is one silver lining for our sector, which is that all these tensions have brought about in the political community at the highest level, so I'm speaking about Prime Minister, head of state level, that telecom is a critical infrastructure. The knowledge that telecom is a critical infrastructure carries with it a series of consequences in how then ministers and regulators approach us. Maybe until a few years ago, we were only the sector that had one job to do. Connect people and give it to them at the lowest price possible. You are the bill that gets into their inbox at the end of the month. All the geopolitical pressures that we're seeing are bringing about also with the politicians the understanding that the value of what we offer is much higher than just a bill in the inbox at the end of the month. It's really a critical way to communicate, to connect society, to connect businesses, and also to give them a perspective of growth for the future. In Europe, how can you imagine the future for our children? Which jobs will they have in the 2030s and 2040s if we cannot give them fiber to the home everywhere, if we cannot empower manufacturing plants with 5G standalone, if we cannot change how transports or healthcare work thanks to digitalization? So first consideration is the political and the geopolitical understanding that is reshaping a sense of our sector, how critical we are. And then, this brings us to the topic of the panel. If there is this strong political understanding about how critical our sector and the networks are, then resilience becomes a key topic. Here, I tried to discuss a bit with colleagues in the office and to come up with the dimensions of telecom resilience that we see in our world from the Brussels Observatory. Well, resilience can have many meanings, and I'm really looking forward to hearing also how operators on the ground and colleagues understand it. But cybersecurity, of course, is one of the first ones that comes to mind. And the cyber attacks, especially since the Russian aggression against Ukraine in 2022, have been skyrocketing. People are finally aware of what that means and what it means for our networks. There are then other flavors of resilience. Energy. And again, you will hear me making a lot of reference to 2022, because we witnessed this big crisis in Europe on our land that has changed a lot of things. Well, it was in 2022 that governments and European Commission started to reach out also to us as trade associations, to operators, to ask, well, if we cannot rely any longer on Russian gas, if we have energy crisis, how are you going to ensure continuity? And then we discovered during the due diligence ourselves that there was a very diverse situation across member states. For example, not in every member state we have put batteries on the base stations of mobile. So we became aware of how energy and energy supply can quickly become a resilience issue. Climate. Climate is another big crisis that has created a huge wave of awareness on resilience in telecom operators. I remember the floods a few years ago in Germany, where you had to rebuild cabinets, you had to rebuild entire parts of the networks because of the floods. Then we had them in Belgium, then we had them in northern Italy, then Valencia came. Clearly, climate change is a major challenge and is fully in the picture when the topic of physical resilience is concerned. Defense. I will not spend a lot of time on this one because we have the colleague from Ukraine, but we have all understood that, for example, we don't have, in many cases, enough storage of network equipment in case parts of the network equipment get destroyed. And that's an awareness that came about after 2022. And then there is, of course, other challenges like gray zone aggression or terrorism, where you want your network to be resilient during an attack. We had many terroristic attacks in Europe, and resilience is related both to the fact that users will start using the network in an unexpected way, or the physical resilience. And this is, of course, due to external attacks, but there are also internal actors. One episode that I want to bring here to give you the idea of how diverse this resilience topic is. It was 2020 during the pandemic, and we started getting notifications from some of our members that base stations of 4G, or in some cases even 3G, were burned down. So there was arson attacks against antennas. And then we even started getting some notifications that some engineers from the telecom operators who were repairing cabinets for fiber were attacked with knives. so stabbing attacks. And then Connect Europe teamed up with the GSMA. We tried to cast the network a bit higher, and we discovered that in the first month after the first lockdown in the pandemic, there was 120 arson attacks or physical attacks against employees or cabinets. And we discovered why. There was a TikTok challenge claiming that 5G was bringing COVID to people. 5G is the reason why we have COVID. And because of a TikTok challenge that got an hashtag and millions of people engaging with that video, we got suddenly a resilience issue across Europe, across different markets, very different, from Sweden to Italy, from Bulgaria to Portugal, all of a sudden. So this is to conclude and to say that the resilience issue is a very varied one, but in our view, it is not disjointed from the broader question of whether the telecom sector, its vendors, and the whole ecosystem is a healthy one, which leads me to show you just two charts from our annual report with analysis, Mason as well, called State of Digital Communications. Some of it was even quoted this morning by Vincent in his keynote. For the first time in 7 years, we have seen a slowdown of CapEx, of investment, of total sector investment in the sector, a minus 2.2%. And when we compare Europe versus other regions, the investment per capita, CapEx per person, is lower and basically half of the one of the USA, and it's lower than both Japan and South Korea. Why do I want to leave you on these? Of course, there are many reasons and many interpretations behind these numbers, but to me, creating a good, healthy investment environment for our ecosystem, of which telecom operators are one part, but then there are the vendors. There is the Fibre community that we are meeting here today. I mean, we need that ecosystem to be a growth-oriented ecosystem and an ecosystem that can invest more. And here there is many policies at the European level that can be that can be used or started to improve this investment environment, because in the end, we can improve resilience if we can then in turn improve also the overall health of the sector and its financial health and capacity to invest. I'm looking forward to hearing more from the colleagues.
Thank you, Alessandro. 2 years ago, in this conference, we were talking mainly about ESG and a lot of other issues. And today, yesterday, we're talking about network resilience. How fast have things changed? I hope that this panel and also that my short introduction will help you with a little bit more in-depth view into the subject of resilience. What is it? What can we do to promote it? What have we done? What is the current status of affairs? The thing that you see here on the screen are basically words that indeed we didn't really use. The statement that digital infrastructure is the backbone of our society. You know, in our company, Eurofiber, we call it the lifeline of society. That is known, the basis and the backbone of our economy, our prosperity, and now we're saying of our freedom. Eurofiber, very quickly, is and that's also the perspective that I'm going to put on this short presentation. Eurofiber is a company that is in B2B. So we do not serve consumers, but we serve businesses. And in particular, we serve businesses with a large 70,000 kilometer fiber optic network. And in the Netherlands, Belgium, France, and Germany, if a company has really critical usage of data, that is typically the customer of Eurofiber. So take that into account when you listen to what I'm going to say, because that's our perspective. I will talk quickly about 4 different elements of resilience, and I'll take you through that, you know, how we see the subject of resilience. So Eurofiber is supplying 80% of all universities, hospitals, all of the energy networks in the Netherlands are on a network. We are part of the critical infrastructure of the Netherlands. So resilience is an issue that has been with us for a very long time. Now, you all know security by design. You all know privacy by design. We're using the terminology resilience by design not only since this year. And if you look at that, what is resilience by design? You have to look at in several different layers. The active layer, the passive layer, both network, and then you look at the customer layer. On the active layer, we are very well known with that, and we invest a lot of money on the active layer resilience. It is about all kind of rerouting, different type of architectures to make sure that we can handle the traffic in a very sustainable manner. If one thing goes wrong, we do it on the other route. On the passive layer, you will find already the first difference with fiber to the home and other type consumer networks. The first one is installation depth that we use. In the Netherlands, we have 40,000 cable cuts a year. That number has been stable over the years, and it's not going down with a lot of the energy transition work that is still ahead of us. So that is the first cut. The deeper that you're in the ground, the fewer disruptions you will likely have. So that's the first thing that we do on the passive layer. The second, and then it's important to understand we are B2B, is our preference for non-shared networks. So point-to-point is basically to us a means to reduce the impact of large failures on individual customers of Eurofiber. So the more that we do not share, and of course we share in trenches and in ducts, but the fewer shared parts that we have, for instance, on the electronic layer, we do not use PON, the fewer risk our individual customers to have. So we look upon resilience also on architecture and the way that we structure our network on the passive layer. If it goes wrong, what is extremely important is how fast can you repair. We repair guaranteed active layer 4 hours, passive layer 8 hours. And over years, we've been doing even better than that, so it's all on the passive layer. On the consumer level, so this is all network, passive and active. On the consumer level, we are now implementing tooling that is on a location, on a customer, and on a service level resilience. And that is in particular by monitoring on a customer level, monitoring on a service level to that customer, and of course on a network to that location, exactly what could potentially go wrong. AI is going to help us a lot in the future to predict that, and the better that we can predict that, the more proactively can we prevent disruptions on the network. The second element here is that the network in total resilience is only one piece of it. The other piece on that network, what it connects on the data center side and then into the cloud, is equally important. It really doesn't make sense to only talk about resilience for networks if you don't look at the total chain. Now, we are known in the data center world to twinning. We're looking at twinning also at the energy front. So we have 11 data centers, and we're looking at which is the source of energy that feeds those data centers that are twinned. So those are the type of things that we're looking at. Of course, we provide access to private clouds, hybrid clouds, and public clouds. Also there, the redundancy means you need alternative paths to the cloud. And all of that needs to be integrated with your network design. How you connect the different data centers, you have to be absolutely certain that the network leading to those data centers have different routes, different entry points, and so on and so forth. The next point here is the security mitigation of threats. I mean, what do we do if it goes wrong? Now, we as a company, we have invested tremendously, much more than we did in the past, in the NOC and the SOC activities, and especially all those predictive triggering points so that we know when something is going to happen before it happens. So that type of investment will be increasing a lot going forward. And the last thing is the people factor. That's interesting, and people, some of you are working probably in a security area. And in the security arena, it is very well known that people are very, very important to look out for. That could be employees or previous employees. They have access, and access is something that people can use. And the funny thing is that the more resilient you want to be, you need happy people to work in your company. And you need them to be very well trained. You need them to be disciplined. You need to be organized. So we are very much looking also at the people aspect of resilience, which is totally not technical, but it's a very important element. So I want to close with that. Thank you very much.
All right. That didn't work. So hello, I'm Trevor Linney, and those of you who haven't heard of OpenReach, we are the UK-based. We're currently building the fibre network of PON-based network. It's around 1 million premises a quarter, and having passed over half the UK and continuing to build. We offer a range of products when it comes to resilience, everything from your residential products, which are, say, PON-based, all the way through to enterprise grade products, point-to-point, where you can order dual fibre routes, where we look down to the very duct level to make sure that if you order a resilient circuit, it doesn't share a single foot of duct, so that there's no single point of failure anywhere between those two ranges, so that you can have the right amount of resilience for the service that you need. But building on the points made by previous, there's two things. One is we are, because we run critical national infrastructure, either for the fibre to the home, connecting the populations of the UK, or indeed the Ethernet networks that underpin government or enterprise, it is critical national infrastructure. And the government and the regulator have understood this for a while, and we've got two almost, see on the left-hand side, unassuming looking documents that had quite profound implications on how you run networks in the UK. The first was the Telecom Security Act, or TSA. This was it was set down in 2021. It set out something like it was followed up by a code of practice, which gave us effectively 6 or 7 years to harden our networks to ensure that they could operate. And that has required us to change almost everything in the network, down to requiring our network vendors to remove every single shared username and password from the infrastructure, because if you've got a box, if your OLT can be logged into and it's got the same username and password everywhere across your infrastructure, you obviously, one person who happens to be disenfranchised in the NOC can go and exploit that very easily. So you have to have unique passwords. We're having to put requirements in terms of how you protect it through unique certificates, encrypted protocols, but equally fundamentally how you change the network. By March 2027, it is required that should the UK become isolated from the world due to subsea cable cuts, we can run our network for a month. Now just think about that for a moment. How many of your business processes require people in another country to help, be it your ASGs, your software developers, people who lean in and do migration support? There's an awful lot of stuff that you rely on, and yet because you're having to actually take that lens if you were geographically isolated. By extension, we're also having to think about what is the underlying network architecture, segmentation of your network management domain from your corporate domain, that if your corporate domain was compromised, it cannot taint the network. And you place a very different lens to it. Technicians who can't access the network without a support ticket. There's a new, if you haven't heard this term before, you may fit, there's something called a Privileged Accessed Workstation, or POR, that ETSI's been working on, which fundamentally changes the way that your network operations center will be able to talk to the network using sort of browse up rather than sort of browse down type things. Removing hands from the network, because everyone who can log into your network is able to damage your network. And it really fundamentally changes the way you think about your business processes and how you run things. We're in the process of implementing those requirements. And I think we'll talk about equally, there's a European equivalent to the same thing, because it's all about saving that one about how do we harden our CNI. The regulator has also published additional guidance on resilience. Things like battery backup was referred to before. You know, every piece of active network equipment should have at least 4 hours of battery backup if it's in the street, and other obligations in terms of how you recover from incidents. And the other part we look at, we are fundamentally changing our network architecture. How do you create something that is highly resilient as you scale up through the bandwidth demands of our PON networks? So we are in the process of using data center inspired hardware and software to effectively move to the leaf-spine leaf type architecture, so we can actually service demands such as how do we do when we build an NNI or network interconnect from our wholesale network to our communication providers. How can we start offering things like 100 gig protected cable links, NNIs, to mean that as you load up these customers and more people become reliant on it, how can you ensure that you can fulfill effectively all the network demand, even under resilience of the majority of components? And that requires you to rethink how you build your networks as well, and indeed how you sort of respond and configure them to be able to deliver that level of resilience. And look forward to discussing both the implications of the legislation and how we respond to it technically in the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Virginie Girardin. I'm working at Proximus, the incumbent operator in Belgium. I'm Fibre Network Department Lead, and in my teams, we do the engineering, but also the deployment of the fiber network in Belgium. So we started deploying fiber in Belgium in 2016, and at that moment, the engineering teams of Proximus believed that to have a qualitative and resilient network, it has to be done by design. And we thought that there were a few pillars to do it. The first pillar is the following. There is always human error possible. You cannot avoid it, but you can mitigate it. In Proximus, we invested, and we still invest a lot in the training, in the certification, and also in the regular recertification of our field technicians. In our architecture, of course, we foresee some power safety margins to make sure, again, to mitigate those human errors that could happen. Finally, but I will come back on it more in detail a little bit afterwards, the construction quality can be immediately validated at the moment it is executed. The second pillar for us is a qualitative network documentation. Why? Because this network will be used for decades. There will be roadworks on it. We're going to make modifications in the future. So the basis for this is to have a very good network documentation. To cover this, we made sure that our construction partners are obliged, at the moment they hand over a fiber zone to us, that they deliver high-quality standards documentation. The second point as well is to make sure that in the future, this documentation remains good, that you have the good processes and tools when you will modify the network in the future. And now I come to the third pillar, which is at Proximus, the thing we are the most proud of, because we have managed to implement a monitoring system which is running every day based on automated OTDR measurements. And those OTDR measurements are feeding AI predictive models. And I will explain it a little bit more in the next slide. So how does it work? I was saying that everything is working by design, but it is really the case. At the moment of the design, we will generate some measurement points. Then, when we go to construction, we have a follow-the-light construction where we will do measurement points at several network points. So the technician is on the field. What we do is we use optical reflectors in our point-to-multipoint network. And immediately, when the technician launches the measurement, he gets the confirmation of the quality of the work that has been done. If he doesn't have the 3 green balls, he cannot go away. The other advantage as well is that we can immediately know, because this system is linked to our Fibre inventory, on the next day we know when the home pass has been done, which is also very useful for our operational reporting. I explained that we use optical reflectors in our point-to-multipoint network. We are also building a point-to-point network in a German-speaking community of Belgium, and there we are using another method, which is a fiber cliff method. We use it during construction. In our point-to-multipoint network, we go one step further, because actually we can do network monitoring any day after the construction. So we generate every night or every day automatic OTDR measurements, and we get the results of those, and this feeds the AI predictive model, which allows us to see when there is a degradation in our network. So this means that we are able to see before the customer notices that a degradation is occurring in our network. This AI predictive model is linked to our work order system, and so we create repair work orders for our field technicians so that they go and repair the network when it's needed. At the moment, it's about 20% of our repair work orders which are done proactively. So, of course, we have very good and very strong repair contracts. It's very important to respect the SLAs, and also you will never avoid a cable cut, especially in Belgium where we have buried cables. But our benefitness system, that's the way we called it, is really the foundation of network quality within our Proximus network.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you for being with us today, and special thanks to the organizers and my colleagues for the opportunity to share our experience in terms of resilience of telecom infrastructure in Ukraine. Today, I'd like to share with you the reality in Ukraine over the 3 years of full-scale Russian invasion, and about the experience we have gained. You know, at Ukr Telecom, ensuring the sustainable connectivity and to the different kind of clients, starting from our military bodies, from for our state agencies, for the government bodies, and for the businesses and for the residents, became essential for us due to the permanent physical or cyber attack on our infrastructure. From this aspect, we learned a lot. We relocate our key nodes and our important sites to this saved area in order to, how to say, protect our operation from that permanent attack, what I mentioned about. The underlying FTTH architecture allowed us to continue service even during the power outage, what we are facing quite often in Ukraine due to that permanent attack, especially on our critical energy infrastructure. All those lessons, what we learned during this terrible time, allowed us to keep and run services even under that terrible conditions. And one of the critical things that's, power independence of connectivity for different type of clients, what we have to provide in order to keep people, businesses, agencies, and the armed forces of Ukraine with the correct and reliable information flow, which is very important under these circumstances. And, in wartime, independence of the services became the key feature for the businesses and for the population as well. And, fiber optic GPON infrastructure enabled us to keep and run services even during quite a long period of blackouts, especially, as I said, our critical backbone nodes, our OLTs, and upper-level network sites completely supported by our diesel generators and sets of battery, and we are able to provide service during up to 96 hours after the external electricity supply. All those things we will talk about a bit later in more details. And of course, we will share with you our experience regarding the protection against cyber attack. That's one of the important things what we are facing, and threats what we are facing practically every day. And what is the most difficult decision which I have made during my professional careers? In March 2022, once the very wide and strong attack began, we voluntarily decided to cut off some part of our network infrastructure in order to avoid intrusion of Russian troops and in order to avoid compromising of our sites from the occupants, and actually it allowed us to continue service to the key important clients, such as I mentioned, our military clients, to the government structures, and to the nationwide businesses. All those things actually cost us very valuable experience, which we are ready to share and talk about a bit later. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think it was mentioned a bit by Alessandro in his allocution. The change in the geopolitical situation means that more than ever there is a risk of either physical or cybersecurity attack on network. Also, climate change, as Alessandro alluded to, is a major risk, and the increasing frequency of adverse weather events means that floodings and storms are more frequent, meaning that the impact on the network is more prominent. So basically, today it's not just operators who are thinking about the resilience of network, but it's also governments and the Commission, because it is any outage has a significant impact in terms of economic and societal. So the EU, for example, as you probably all know, has made 2 key recommendations in the last 3 years. So the first one was in December 2022, which was the NIS2, which is a recommendation on cybersecurity, which basically mandated member states to develop a national strategy for cybersecurity, to report cybersecurity events, and also to share data on cybersecurity whenever they were attacked, so that it could benefit all of the countries. The second key recommendation was the critical entity recommendation. And again, it was mentioned in some of these allocutions where basically certain industries, including the telecom industry, have got some obligation to basically maintain the telecom, for example, for the telecommunications, ongoing, and take measures for that. So really, in view of these two things, and also we've just seen from Trevor that Ofcom has published some guidelines regarding the resilience of network. The network had to evolve, and operators had to basically change the way they are doing things to basically to comply with these requirements. So the first question to the panel is, how do EC recommendations on network resilience impact the way operators build, operate, and maintain their network? And the first question will go to Alessandro.
Thanks a lot, Frank. Maybe the first thing to say is that NIS2, Network Information Security 2, has introduced some good things, I think, for telecom operators. And one thing that we struggled with for many years is that there was no real recognition in law that we are operating in an ecosystem. So when it comes to cybersecurity on telecom networks, not everything is in our power as telecom operators. We need to be able to work with the vendors, with the suppliers, and with the full ecosystem. So one good thing that I think makes everybody's life easier and better with NIS2 is the recognition of the fact that we are an ecosystem and that we need all to take our part of the responsibility, which of course then makes it also easier to handle things. Because if you only have one part of the ecosystem that develops that awareness, then it doesn't work well. Now, on the downside, what we are seeing is also a proliferation of different cyber risk management and reporting obligation and schemes. Then there is a lot of variability between one EU member state and the other, not to talk if you are a company that has EU operations and non-EU operations. So the lack of harmonization is one of the biggest problems, and also the overlaps. But these overlaps, by the way, are not only there when it comes to telecom or cybersecurity legislation across member states, but also it's a vertical one. It's among different types of legislation. For example, the case of the interdependency between the telecom and the financial services sector. Sometimes it's very difficult to draw a line and understand what are we applying. And there is a lot of uncertainty right now in how we apply the NIS2 with the Digital Operational Resilience Act, which is another tool imagined for other sectors, but of course they interact a lot. So what we are asking right now, actually, to the European institutions and to governments is to come up with a sort of EU cybersecurity rule book that brings things together, makes sense of it, eliminates duplications, and harmonizes as much as possible. There is resistance, of course, because security in EU terms is still a national matter. So when you start touching security, you start touching some sensitivities that are almost constitutional in the EU system. But of course, with the current geopolitical pressures, it is a no-brainer to promote more harmonization, or we won't get out of it.
Thank you, Alessandro. I'll ask the same question to Paul.
We have, as Eurofiber, a lot of financial customers. So we have to do with DORA. We have to do with NIS2. We have to do with the CES. There's a lot of regulation coming at us. Let me take the question in a little bit different way of how we deal with it, because all of those regulations, they build a framework to slowly become more and more secure in how we handle the digital networks. But there's one simple thing that is very, very practical for our customers, and that's a debate that we have with the customers every day. And that is, irrespective of all those things that you need to get under control from a process point of view, a systems point of view, regulation point of view, is redundancy. Just build redundancy, because whatever happens is reduce the single point of failures that you have and build redundancy. And redundancy is a still very much underserved and overlooked issue. Redundancy so we serve the large enterprise and the top end of the SME and corporates. That's our customer base. And we see companies, customers of ours with very large turnovers who build redundancy based on consumer type networks. So we're all here very much fans, as am I, of fiber to the home. But fiber to the home is a consumer built network, as is some of the mobile networks. So we see examples of customer of ours that they build redundancy on 4G, and then really something happens and 4G doesn't have the capability to handle it. So the discussion that we are having right now to deal with all these issues is, when you build redundancy, spend more time on thinking about that and build that in a higher quality fashion. Your second line, or your third or your fourth, we have last year connected all airports in the Netherlands 4 times redundant. They are not going down. I mean, that we know now for sure. That is a bit too much, but spend more time on the quality of your redundancy is a measure as an antidote to this whole topic. And that's, I think, that is something that deserves a lot more attention than we currently give it.
Thank you, Paul. And finally, Trevor, do you want to answer that question?
Well, we've already touched on some of the things that, are being driven by the UK equivalent of these. I think sometimes there's a mindset change associated with some of these. If you almost come from a cyber perspective, it's almost act as if your network has already been compromised. How are you looking internally to see whether someone's living off the land? And so you have requirements like that. So this might make a few people who run networks at scale shudder. If you look at your element management platforms that run the networks, there's a requirement to burn and rebuild them from scratch periodically to make sure that there isn't something hiding inside that box that means they can delete all the circuits off the network because it's already been compromised. And you sit there and a very simple statement to make when you think about how do you operationalize something which is effectively to rebuild an element manager that might have, its chunky size of your network required, what tooling you need, how do you assure it, your backup processes. Sorry, you can't use a backup because if by backing up, you're actually taking the compromise with you. So it can't be an operating system level backup. It can only be a config level backup. So how do you think about how would you take down to the bare metal and the VMs and rebuild from scratch your entire estate periodically just to make sure that someone isn't hiding in that hasn't hidden something on that box? And you might say that's paranoia. But I think, it really does sort of say that the mindset change that these regulations trying to drive, it might be a very low probability event, but if it's a low probability, high impact event, how do you design everything from, as Paul pointed out, every single layer you've built up, how do you make sure you've built in those resilience into your design, your architecture, your processes, your people? It does make me wonder, how do you make sure that someone in your NOC can't do something that you really you're going to lose sleep over? How do you build the right processes around that? So I think there is a lot of good stuff in here. I think it does actually drive that mindset of, if I'm running critical national infrastructure, how do I harden and how do I recover if it does happen? So I think it is a positive thing. They did give us the Ofcom ask every 6 months for an update on how we're getting on. And for some of the stuff in legislation, they did effectively give us 5 years because they realized how fundamental the re-engineering of some of these things is in terms of your business processes. So I think it's just do encourage people to look at these requirements. It might be the tier ones are all over it, but this will ripple down because if everybody's using other people's networks, then these requirements will come in, and almost our countries are only as strong as the weakest link for some of this stuff. So yeah, it's going to be some interesting time to come.
Thank you, Trevor. And Yuri, do you want to give us your perspective on this?
Yes, well, on the path of Ukrainian strong willingness, unwavering willingness to become a member of EU in 2022, we have faced that terrible invasion. And, it may sound strange, but the war forced our government, our telecom regulatory commission, and the telco player to speed up implementation of some EU recommendations in terms of protection of critical infrastructure and in terms of cybersecurity. Just for example, in July 2022, Ukrainian government established so-called State Service for Protection of Critical Infrastructure and Ensuring the National Resilience System. All these steps actually helped us to coordinate our activity and our actions in order to keep and run services and connectivity to the critical infrastructure clients. And apart from this, actually, all of these steps allowed us to reinforce ability of critical infrastructure to protect from the cybersecurity and from cyber attack, as well as from the physical attacks. But apart from that, there were some practical cases when we, the players or the national-wide telecom companies, voluntarily and consciously decided to share our infrastructure in order to ensure that sort of redundancy which was heavily needed, especially during first phase of that full-scale invasion, and still we keep and going that way. For example, the national roaming immediately after the big war has been started, voluntary was introduced by our mobile operators, and still for free of charge, without any finance settlements between mobile operators, works, and still we provide service to the customers wherever they are, and seamless connectivity at this point of time available for our residents. From the practical point of view and perspective, in Kherson region, that region has been fully occupied at the beginning stage of that invasion, and after after the occupation, and we have no available sites and long-distance fiber lines, and we share it with our colleagues and with other telecom operators, and we save time for demining all those territories and for restoration of our site, which was completely compromised and some of them completely destroyed. That's sort of cooperation allowed us to withstand against that terrible attack during the beginning of the full-scale war, and still we continue that kind of cooperation.
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you. We come to the second question now. So there are different resilience requirements depending on whether you are serving the B2B or the B2C market, as Paul alluded to, and also whether you are a wholesaler or a retailer operator. So the question is, could you please explain what is the most important in terms of resilience for your targeted market segments and business model? And the first question goes to, this question goes to Virginie.
Yeah, okay. Actually, at Proximus, for point-to-multipoint network, it is the same for every kind of customer. Okay, so what we have done is that within the access network, we don't have redundancy implemented. So it always goes to, okay, financial considerations. You cannot expect to do a FTTH network with full redundancy up to the last mile. You cannot do this, so you have to ask yourself two questions. How many customers am I ready to impact? And if they are impacted, how long do I keep them impacted? So, for example, at Proximus, we know that in a worst case, if we have a cable cut in the access network, we could have 2,000 customers impacted. And on that moment, what we need to have is very good repair contracts, having strong partners to do the repair, very good SLAs defined with them, just to intervene as fast as possible. Because I think that people understand when there is an issue, people understand that, okay, you are facing an issue, but they count on you to solve it as fast as possible. Within Proximus, we of course have redundancy, but it starts behind the OLT, so in the backbone network. And for our very high-end customers, we offer very high rate lines, bespoke lines, where we have a full backup solution. So I would say that for the SLAs, it's again a little bit the same. Depending on your customer, you define different SLAs. So our residential customers, they know that, okay, we will do a best effort to intervene within the day, but some of our high-end customers can expect a repair in the 2 hours. And I was speaking that it's important to have good contracts and good partners, but it's also good to be able to measure your SLAs, because if you measure, you're able to see if your partners are meeting the promise that we made to the customer, and you are able to correct it. So it's not always that easy to do it, because if you really want to see it from a customer's perspective and measure end-to-end, when did the problem occur, or when did the customer see the problem, and when was it solved? It's not so easy to measure it, but I think it's important to do it to make sure that we solve the problem of the customer in the time frame that was promised to them.
Thank you, Virginie. The same question will go to Paul now.
Yeah, let me again give a different perspective to this. So the redundancy, so I want to tag on something that both of you said, which is how you look at this risk that we're talking about. So why do you need redundancy? And that helps a little bit if you talk to customers or partners about, how to deal with this. So the subject of redundancy, we've now talked about quite a lot, and you explained it very well. There's a big difference in redundancy requirements for the different type of customers. But again, the debate about how much redundancy do I actually need, that debate is interesting again to have. And that is where both of you already said, that is chance of a disruption happening times impact. And if you think about that for a second, the chance of disruptions it has multiple causes in the disruption. So cable cuts is the first one. We all know that. It's, by the way, it's completely certain that all of you will experience a cable cut. The only question is, when will it happen, and how redundant are you to see if there was an impact on that? So disturbances will happen, and so far in the Netherlands, it is mostly cable cuts, besides all the attacks that we have on the software layers, on the active layers. The impact is increasing a lot because of the growing dependency we have on digitization. So if you do chance times impact, that is what we typically do in risk matrices, when we think about business continuity. That discussion and that debate is completely going up a lot. And we are not investing yet in many parts of our businesses and institutions to that higher multiple of chance times impact. So again, the solution is rather simple, build additional redundancy, but the discussion below that is just have the debate about this chance times impact situation with your customers.
Thank you. Thank you. And Trevor, do you want to give the wholesale perspective on this?
I think it's all pretty much been said in terms of the difference between the what are the customers willing to buy in terms of that obviously changes the SLAs. When you move into business products, those SLAs become SLGs. So if you're not fixing it within a certain amount of time, then you're paying out. But ultimately, as you say, as engineers, we can design something that will meet the product. So our highest resilience, it's completely separate equipment, each of which has 2 power supplies. It's stored in different racks. It goes through different ducts. It goes to different handover nodes. You can say, thou shalt never have them in the same streets. By diverse routing, we can build these solutions. Ultimately, it comes down to whether the customers realize they need it, and ultimately, are they going to pay for it, because there's a huge difference between a PON with a single port ONT in it that costs tens of dollars and fully assured, resilient, dedicated WDM system which costs orders of magnitude more to deliver once you've got full geographic diversity. So I think sometimes it comes down to as you say, how do you properly assess the business continuity risk that's built upon our infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our last question, and I'll ask you to be quite brief because I think we are a bit over time. When a network is hit by a force majeure event, which we mentioned, and Alessandro again alluded to it, should it be a storm, flooding, and so on, you need to reorganize your operational resources to make sure that the highest impact incident is resolved first, and then, for example, the single line faults are resolved last. So the question is, at a regulatory level, what needs to be considered to ensure that operators has the right incentives to repair its network? And also, could you share with us your operational best practice to fast-track fiber network repair after a force majeure event? And the first question goes to, this question goes to Alessandro.
There could be many things that we can ask to governments and regulators. As Connect Europe, we have long lists called position papers. So I'll choose 2. One is governance. Governance can change a lot of things. I'll make an example. Submarine cables, a subject that came up a lot when talking about resilience. Today, there is so many rules, so many jurisdictions that the submarine cable goes through. And even inside the EU, sometimes it's difficult to get member states to agree on how to act when there is a cable cut. Now, again, because of the gray zone aggressions we are experiencing, the topic is on top of the political agenda, and people are rediscovering position papers that we had written a few years ago. But there is a lot that can be done in terms of governance. The same on cybersecurity threats. Just imagine how different things work in each member state, also intelligence agency giving the heads up to operators. There is so much that you can do to improve. The second and last one that I will mention is investment, investment, investment. I heard it from Paul, I heard it from the Proximus colleague. Redundancy has a cost. And so we need to create an awareness that whatever policymakers and regulators do to improve the investment climate is also investment in connectivity. By the way, when in resilience, because by the way, when we measure the famous investment gap in Europe, we always measure the investment gap compared to the full fiber and full 5G targets of the EU. We say by 2030 we want to have full fiber and full 5G everywhere in Europe, and then we measure the gap. How much money do we miss? We never measure the gap in terms of cybersecurity and resilience. Probably we should start putting a number also there.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. And Yuri, by force majeure, of course, the act of war is a big force majeure, so it would be interesting to know your perspective on this. How do you reorganize? How have you reorganized your operational resources to basically make the network continue to operate?
Well, apart from the mentioned before, one of the experience what we have faced, and actually I didn't share here, once that terrible conditions start, let's say that's similar like a national-wide disaster crisis happened, that's comparable with what we are facing right now. We should also take into consideration that people and businesses may, in our case, they did movement to the safe side of the country, small, medium enterprises, residents, we call civilians now, our terms changed a little bit. That required from us to be very fast, very proactive, by the way, in order to provide them in those new locations services which will allow them first to survive, the second to continue their business operations. But first we were thinking about ourselves infrastructure. We moved our data centers at those saved regions. We deployed alternative long-distance fiber lines just to ensure the uninterruptible service and uninterruptible connection between our sites and critical nodes, as well as we, let's say, duplicate our key network platform in the new data centers. And then we were able to react on the business demand in the new locations in order to continue their normal so-called business operations. That's some sort of, not redundancy example, but fast reaction on the business and people needs under such terrible circumstances. And one of the challenges what we are facing right now, we talked a lot, actually all those words are absolutely right and true. The customer satisfaction, or let's say, we have to repair the cable in case of damaged or if it's cut. But for that we need field force staff. In our case, it's not an easy operation. Things, ongoing mobilization doesn't allow us to use, civil work subcontractors or even the technical field force support outsourced from the other organizations and companies. We should rely on ourselves resources in order to continue that normal operation, including the repairing of the cut cable and to restore some of our sites and nodes. But because of this reason, actually, we moved our critical nodes, as I said, and OLTs for FTTH GPON architecture to the 45 locations where we can, operate safely and to continue maintaining our equipment and delivering service to our clients.
Okay, thank you. And finally, I will ask Virginie to answer the same question.
Okay, I think what is important is to train before on a disaster that could occur. Within Proximus, we have a disaster recovery squad, and the goal of this team is to define all the procedures that would be put in place in case of a disaster, but most important, to test them a lot of times everywhere, because it's when you have trained, at the moment it occurs, you are much more efficient. I can give some examples of what we have practically in place. So if a global network element fails in a room, let's say, a room is failing, we have a flight case that we can bring and that we can put in service very fast. If it's a full building which goes down, we have a container solution. We have already trained this container solution which can replace the building. Okay, not all the customers, but at least the most important ones. We mentioned it as well. Power is very important. We have batteries for service and aggregation nodes. We have power generators, and we have a contract with an external company that can deliver additional power generators in case it would be useful somewhere else in the country. And also, I will explain the experience we got with the floods in Belgium in 2021. HR-wise, we have some processes which allow to move some people who are normally only working north of the country, some HR rules which can be activated to move them to the south of the country, for example. Because this is exactly what happened during the floods in 2021. It was not on our fiber network, it was on our copper network. Okay, the floods have impacted 40,000 customers. Just to let you imagine, the foundation stones of our mobile sites had moved by more than 10 meters, so you can imagine how catastrophic it was. And there, actually, we couldn't use a container because there was no power. So what we did, and Yuri explained it a little bit, we finally decided to put a long cable to one of our next central offices to make sure we have a temporary solution. But if you ask us within Proximus what we all remember, these are all the Flemish colleagues moving day and night and working with the French-speaking colleagues. And okay, as a conclusion, and maybe to link with what Yuri is saying, that exactly. When there is something catastrophic, the borders disappear a little bit.
Yeah. Again, I think we will stay there. Exactly, right on the spot.
Right on time.
So thank you very much for all of you. I think, Paul, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, let me invite you all for free drinks now. we have a party. So Eurofiber is 25 years old today, and we have a party in the middle of the exhibition area, the orange area, free drinks for all of you. So you're all welcome.
Thank you.